Howdy, Larken Rose here. I thought I would do a quick sort of making of video to tell people about how the mirror actually works. Um, and the two main parts of the project, one is the writing of the script. It's a script, but it's sort of like a five-dimensional script, because what it asks you depends on how you answered the last question. So it's a giant flow chart. If they say yes, then it moves over here and all that. So that's sort of half of the work. The other huge project is the computer animation. And if you've seen the trailer teaser thingy I made for it, you may recognize what you're looking at right now. The program is called Blender. Right now I just have it in solid mode where it's not showing all the textures because the computer has to think for a while to make all the textures actually appear. But here you have what I refer to as Brain City. It's not called that in the program. I just refer to it as that myself. In the intro, when you fly through this stuff, it just sort of looks like abstract random mayhem. There's actually rhyme and reason to all of it. I'm going to make pieces of it disappear here so you can actually see the other pieces. Because even though it doesn't say this in the intro, you just sort of fly through and go, what the hell is all this stuff? There is a direct representation. Everything in here represents something about the human mind. Now, obviously, this is not what the human brain looks like, unless you have something seriously wrong with you. But each piece in here represents something about how our brains work. And as you go through the process, you learn more about what the different things represent. I mean, the eyes and the ears are kind of obvious. So that the senses, this chunk is what they attach to. So this is just sort of the physical senses. The thing underneath that you see is emotions, the blob underneath this thing. Doot, doot, ding. I'll just leave it out for the time being. And a big thing that it focuses on is this green crystal thing. It's not green at the moment. This thing. Because that is our perceptions. And I made it be a refracting prism on purpose. Here, I'll make it look a little bit more interesting by sticking materials on it. No, it just looks weird. But perceptions altering the way we perceive the world, and how we perceive things is not always how they are, which is a recurring theme, and it goes through that. Then behind that, I'll just give you a turbo tour here. This big tower and the thing on top represents basically our analytical mind, our intellectual processor of stuff, how we actually think about things. These stacks of weird interlocking hexagon type things on both sides are memory. This glowy red thing in the middle is morality. Behind it is beliefs. And all these tubes in between aren't random. They may look that way until you actually get into it. They mean information being conveyed. For example, this is the senses, where your ears come in your eyes, and your senses convey information to your perceptions, but then your perceptions change it. And your memory affects your perceptions. And your analytical brain affects perceptions, and things affect all sorts of other things, and it goes through that. Oh, and underneath all of it, you have this weird water texture thing, which represents your subconscious. I'll let it render here for a minute. So right now we have a few pieces of it not showing the processor that goes here. And each one of these elements has a star thingy on it that's open that nothing's plugged into. And you fly around in your little spaceship, and so you're looking through the screen at this while you fly around in it. And it'll actually have a probe that comes flying out and attaches to these things, and the screen comes down in front of the spaceship and gives a readout. So it shows you information, and then it shows you a million other things. The whole thing does not take place in this. This is just sort of where the main, this is the main area. But in the screen in your little spaceship that you're flying around in, studying your own brain, it'll come down and it shows a zillion different representations of all sorts of things having to do with mainly what you think about the world, how things are, how you think things ought to be, and all that. Um, but I wanted to there it's sort of rendered. I'm not going to wait for it to actually render well. Um, but so I had to design each of these pieces and sort of fit them together in this weird abstract way, and then wire them all together with a whole bunch of these tubes. And it actually, if this was a rendered version, you would see the movement of all those pipes show the direction of communication. For example, your perceptions will affect your memory, and your memory will affect your perceptions, so there's flow in both directions, and things like that. You build it in 3 dimensions, and once it exists, you can animate it all over the place. And here, I'll do something silly just to demonstrate. So I can pick up perceptions and move it around. And then once it's built, you can animate things and change their position, change everything about them, change their texture, do all sorts of things, make them glow, you can basically do anything, but you have to build a world from scratch, and then you can do whatever you want with the whole thing. As you can see, it's a pretty complicated process. There's always visual representations of what you're being asked about, to make them more memorable, and that'll always be on the screen that comes down in your little spaceship thing. So obviously building this takes a while. Well, maybe it isn't obvious if you haven't done it. Sometime watch a professional animated movie and then look at the credits, keeping in mind there are no real people in the whole thing. Like, there's no cameras. It's all computer generated, but it takes a lot of freaking work to make these things and animate these things, and there'll be tons of different sets and tons of different scenes. Because it isn't just drawing a 2-dimensional picture, you have to design the whole 3-dimensional world and every piece of every item, so that when you go to animate it, you can do whatever you want with it. And the thing is, when you animate it, you then have to let the computer think about it for a really long time, which is known as rendering, which I'll demonstrate one more time. I've probably babbled enough about this video, but you can see it has to think and think and think. Up here, it's doing different samples, and it has to do, like, I have it set to 88, so by the time it's through all 88, it looks pretty dang clear and pretty dang cool. Right now, I have the space background turned off. And you can do all sorts of cool things, like the water actually moves, and I custom made that texture, and so there's a ton of work that goes into just making it sort of visually interesting, that has nothing to do with the philosophy and the logic and stuff. But if you don't make it entertaining and engaging and memorable, then it doesn't nearly have the impact. We're very visual animals, and so the whole thing is very visual, with Brain City just being one of the sets of, I don't even know how many, a lot. And the Brain City is the abstract weird set. Most of them actually represent stuff that makes sense. But so it's a massive amount of work, and it takes forever. And this is probably, not even probably, this is easily the most complex program I've seen in my life, that I've ever used. And it has all these different things. Over on the left, you have these things, they're called nodes, that determine what the texture is of all the different materials that stuff can be made out of, and you make still images and wrap them around, and just, it's really damn complicated. I'm not going to bother trying to explain it all. So for hours and hours and hours and hours and days, I was playing around before I knew how to do anything. Now I'm fairly comfortable that I can cruise around the program and do what I want to do fairly quickly. There's still, like, every once in a while, there's some weird thing that I have to look up and find some tutorial to say how to do it. There, I let it sort of fast forward and render some more without you having to sit there watching it. And then you can see more of the details in the cool water, which actually moves, and I had to, like, manually make a texture that will do that, and you decide where the lights are and all sorts of cool stuff. But it takes a ton of work, and so the good news is Blender is free. It's open source software, and it's free. I think I actually gave them $50 to get a package deal thing and to help them out, because it's a really cool program. And the audio program I use is also free. It's called Reaper. So it's not like, well, I need $20 bazillion. But so mainly the thing is just being able to have the time to work on this full time is my job. And that whether I can do that depends on whether people throw money at me so I can do that. Again, when the project's done, it's going to be given away for free. So there's no payout. It's not an investment, and I'm not going to like cash in at the end. I get nothing. Financially for all my work, I get absolute zero when it's done because I'm releasing it to the whole world for free. But that's how it has to be. And so that's sort of the animation side of things, just a crash course in how it works. And there's a lot to it. And it is, by far the most complicated program I've ever used. And it took me a long time before I had any idea what I was doing with it. And there are 8 bazillion functions on every single thing, and it takes forever to figure out how to actually do it. But now I'm pretty comfortable and efficient and fast with it. So it's picking up speed, but for I don't know how many days and hours and weeks and months I worked on it to get up to where I am now. But now it's going a lot more smoothly and a lot more quickly. One problem is because it isn't just a video, because it's not just a linear thing, it's not just here I can show you this piece of it. There are a bunch of different pieces of it, and any single user who goes through it is only going to see a small percentage of it, because whatever question they answer, whatever answer they didn't give, would have been a completely different direction and a completely different set of follow-up questions and all that. And so it's just, there is no way to show all of it at once what it's going to do, because you can only go one direction or the other depending on how you answer each question. But I still have to make all of that. We have to write and record all of the narration for it and animate all of it. Oh, that was the thing I was going to mention is, one thing you cannot do with real cameras, but you can with computer animation, is it remembers everything digitally and precisely, so you can remember where the camera is. So the camera can come to a place and ask you a question, and if it's yes, then it cruises over here and asks something. If it's no, then it cruises over there and asks something. And for the user, it always feels like a linear one-shot experience cruising around, but it goes in different directions depending on how you answer, and it shows different visuals and can do whatever it wants. But it all feels like, it's people have compared it to the choose your own adventure thing, only it's all one seamless thing for any user, because the camera always starts, it'll come to a question and then stop there and wait for you to answer and then decides where to go. So for any user, it's all one big smooth, flowing conversation with the thing, even though, that one user is only seeing the tiniest percentage of the amount of stuff we actually built for the thing, so that it can go in any direction depending on what you actually answer. So, all right, so I guess that's enough geek babbling about this thing, but this program is really dang cool. I love this thing, and now I sort of know what I'm doing. And thankfully I know what I'm doing, because paying professional animators to do it would be insanely expensive. So, all right. So here, I'll give him his dome back. There's his frame. Whoops. There's his dome frame. I made it invisible just so you can see the guts of his head. Now I'll close him in. There he is. Nifty Kane. So that is my first little silly making of video about making the mirror. I'll try to produce one now and then when I'm making new sets and rendering new pieces of it for whatever geeks are interested. And if anybody wants to throw money at it so I can work full-time on this, that would be hugely appreciated. Otherwise, I'll work in it when I can. But the sooner this gets finished, the better, if you ask me. It's still going to be a huge project. A ton of people say, hey, when's it going to be on? I have no freaking idea. It'll be many months at least, and even longer, if I have to do other stuff to pay my dang bills. So, alrighty. So that's my first little making of video.